I will go into the one question that people always ask me, which is how do I do that? And I am going to detail every single stage of how you can create a pixel quilt.
How are you doing today? And can you tell everybody a little bit about yourself?
I'm Dee. I've been a quilter for 17 years, but 2 years ago, I discovered Pixel Quilts. And honestly, I haven't made anything else since. I always say I was kind of a reluctant quilter because I would quilt and create quilts in order to get the final product so that I could gift it. I didn't love the process of quilts. Whereas now I've discovered Pixel Quilts, I'm a fan.
And I love the quilt behind you. It's so great.
So that's Posty. He was like the second Pixel quilt I ever made. And he was the one that kind of sealed the deal for me because the first one I did was Billie Eilish. And I just thought I'd chosen the only image in the world that could translate into a pixel quilt of a face. And so when I went to do my second quilt, I wanted to choose the most difficult face I could find, which my daughter introduced me to Posty and all his tattoos. So yeah. And then of course there's Her Majesty, and that is she's a replica of the one that was sent to Queen Elizabeth for her Platinum Jubilee.
That's so amazing. Yeah, you'll definitely have to share that story too. So I know that you're a little nervous with it being alive. You're going to do an awesome job. If you need anything, just let me know. I'll be in the background, but I will let you take it away and we can start showing everybody what pixel quilts are.
Well, I will go into the one question that people always ask me, which is how do I do that? And I am going to detail every single stage of how you can create a pixel quilt. But before I did that, I wanted to show you the two different options that are available to you so that when you have designed your pixel quilt, there's two different ways you can sew it. So the way I make pixel quilts and the way I will show you is that everything will be broken down into 8x8 blocks. So if you want a large pixel quilt, your pixels will be 1.5 inch. And if you want a slightly smaller one, then your pixels will be 1.25 inches. Actually, Posty's the large size and Her Majesty is the medium size. So that's the only difference, but they all get broken down into 8x8 blocks. And then this is when you have the choice to make. So there are two different ways that you can put together your blocks. The first way that I usually do, and which 99.9% of my quilts are made out of, is the blocks, if there are similar like colors, then the pieces are blocked together. So this way you actually have less pieces that you have to cut out. And then the other way is that you get yourself some pixel grid, which is by Quilt Smart, and you cut out every pixel. Now, and that ends up being like that. Now, I know it sounds hideous to actually cut out every pixel, but actually it's about the same amount of cutting time as it would be as the ones where you have less to cut, because when you're cutting 1.5 inch pixels and that's all you have to cut, you can do it much quicker. Whereas this one, you really have to concentrate and focus and make sure you're doing the right size. So I wanted to demonstrate this grid because this is pretty new to me as well. And I used it on the last quilt I did. And actually, I was really, really impressed with it. And when I talk to quilters, many who seem like they're a little bit overwhelmed about doing a pixel quilt, this seems to be the kind of starting point that they want to do, that it's going to be easier. This is the bit I'm going to show you now. I've just come up with a super simple pattern that we can follow and just make these two blocks up. With this one, you would just only ever cut 1.5 inches. So we're going for the bigger size at the moment. And then you follow the pattern and you get your grid and then you lay it out on your grid. And once it's all laid out, then you would just go in and press. You can use a silicone pressing mat so that nothing kind of gets on your iron. I have never done that. I'm a bit kamikaze, so if anything ever does get on the iron, honestly, I just kind of wipe it off. But once you have got all of your pieces fixed on, Now what we're going to do is you take the first strip and you fold it over. And if you see on this, you'll see there's markings on it. So it actually makes it super easy for you to be able to go on and know exactly where your 1/4 inch seam allowance is. So we're going to take that and we're going to sew the entire strip. Here's one I've already done a few on. And like I said, the markings just make it kind of super easy. I never backstitch the start of any of my quilts. And I think especially with this interfacing, you really don't need to, because it just gives it like another level of like security. So once you've done that, you just go on to the next strip and go ahead and fold that one over. And you would go through the whole block like this.
I definitely think that's the method I would go with. That makes it look so nice and easy. I love it.
Yeah, you don't have to think a lot when you're doing it this way. And then this is the bit that kind of perplexes few people until you kind of see it up close. So now you've got it sewn all one way. So now you go into this strip, and what you're going to do is, again, you're going to follow the markings, and you're going to clip each in between each square. You're just going to clip in there. And then
I also just want to mention really quickly, we do not currently have this interfacing. However, our product specialist is in the process of getting it added. So anybody that's going to want to try this, we will have it available.
Well, I have only ever found a 1.5 inch interfacing, but actually I'm talking to Quilt Smart at the moment, and they are going to go ahead and produce like a 1.25. Okay, so once you've got all this, can we go over to the iron? You are going to go ahead, and this is the bit that I'm going to make it look crazy tricky, and it isn't at all. But you go ahead and you get your iron, and you iron up one way, and then you go ahead and flip it over, and then you iron up the next way. And you do that throughout the whole thing. And all that means is that now you are going to be able to nest those seams. I don't know whether you can see how nicely they kind of fit together now, because you've kind of ironed them so that they can all nest together. And then again, you just follow like the little lines, and you go through each row. And so again, and this is the only bit where it can kind of get a bit bulky. So if you want to, I mean, generally I just kind of fold it over, but if you want to, you can actually put a pin in there just to make sure it kind of holds back. The other version of Pixel Quilting, where you really do have to kind of concentrate on what you're sewing, this one you don't. Like, you could be watching telly, you could be watching a documentary. This makes it really, really easy. So once you've been through the whole of this, you can see it kind of gets smaller and smaller and smaller. What you're going to be left with is a rather curly version. And then basically you just go into that and iron, give it a good iron, and you'll be left with a nice flat version. So that is the new way I have recently discovered that you can make pixel quilts. I will say that this way adds another element of weight to the quilt. It makes the quilt a little bit more weighty, which is kind of nice. I really wanted to test any of these products before I kind of ever spoke about them, because I want to make sure that it would be something I'm happy with. I was scared it was going to add some stiffness to the quilt. It really doesn't. And actually then I realized it added weight, which I liked. And then in addition to that, I made sure that I actually had the quilt I made with this in, I had it quilted by a lady, Robin, for me. I spoke to her and just said how, you know, was it horrific trying to quilt through it? And she said, no, it was fine. It was absolutely beautiful. So again, quilting, there's no issue with quilting. So that's one way, using your grid. I will say you will probably be cutting, you know, 2, 3, 4 times as many pieces with this way than you will with the way I'm going to show you next. But I think the cutting time is either the same or reduced, because again, when it comes to the cutting and you're just cutting the same pieces all the time for every color, there's really, you don't, you know, you concentrate, but there's really, you don't have to think about it, you just do it. Whereas this next way, you kind of have to think, you have to keep looking back at your pattern. So this way is great because there's kind of not as much sewing, but the sewing that you do, you are gonna have to think about it. So this way, you basically follow the pattern just like you would the other way, but this way you're gonna be getting all your blocks of all the different sizes. And then when you've got all of your blocks of all the different sizes, you then have to look at the pattern and split it into sub blocks, because you need to find a way to put this together that is going to mean that it goes together beautifully and fingers crossed without any Y seams. So the way I would do this is that I would go ahead and sew this one. So these two to this one, same there, and then that is a whole column that I would put together. And then here, the same, that whole section, these two you'd go first, so to that one, so it's that column, these two, and then this one finally. So you can see there's kind of a lot of sewing here, or a lot less, but you have to think about it and you have to stay on the ball with this type. Those are the two different variants of how you can put together a pixel quilt. The look at the end, a tiny bit different. I don't have the one that actually I made recently that is made from the grid, the interfacing grid, is actually on its way to Houston. It's going to be in the Houston quilt show, so I can't even show you that. It does look slightly different. These guys were both made using the method of like blocking the light colors together. The quilt that uses the grid, it is going to give it much more of a pixel look. From afar, you won't notice any difference, but I'll stick a picture up on my social media of the quilt that's going to Houston, just so you can see. It's the Dahlia quilt, so you can see it does look slightly different. I was going to go ahead and show you something that I have never shown live before, and it's the process that I have come up with now to create my own pixel quilts. I've used lots of different every program on the market. If there is a program, if there is a software, if there is a website, if there is a free pixelating software, if there is an app, I've used it. And ultimately, I wanted to create my own, so that my designs are my own, but also just to make it super easy and super accessible, because I think people look at these quilts and think they're really difficult, and actually they're the opposite. They are actually a lot less difficult than probably the quilts you've already been making, because everything is a tiny straight line. That's it. If you can sew a semi-decent 1/4 inch seam allowance, you can make pixel quilt. Like the ones you do and you have triangles and you have bias seams, far more difficult. So, and people think actually you have to be really precise with a pixel quilt as well. Now, I'm sure if I was that personality type of like very precise, then I think maybe my quilts would look a little bit different, but I'm not. And if you ever get up close to any of mine, you'll see that there's going to be wonky seams there. But my husband is an aviation engineer, so he used to design aircraft, very precise. He's exactly the person you want designing the aircraft that you fly on. And he actually came in and saw me. I was straight line quilting the Maya Angelou quilt. And he realized pretty quick that my straight line quilting was kind of a little bit off from the seams. And I could see him just like almost twitching, like I had to send him out. Why I say all this is that people think you have to be super precise when you're making pixel quilts, and really you don't. They are so forgiving. I think they're probably more forgiving than other types of quilts. So, all right, can we swap to my screen and I will do a demo. This is the program I've been working on for a long time with some software developers. It is not out yet. I desperately wanted it to be ready, and it's really not. It's gone through the first stage of testing and I'm currently in the second stage of testing, but I will be looking for beta testers. So if you like the look of this, then definitely send me an email if you want to kind of come on this journey with me. All right, I'm going to go through just the process that I go through. You just go ahead and select the image that you would like to make a quilt out of. This is Miss Kelly, and then there's just there's a crop function. And once you're happy, you can go ahead and move to where the magic happens. This is where the magic happens. And this is why it's taking so long to release. So when the image comes up on the left, you will see that this is a list of the colors that are referenced to Kona cotton fabrics. So their solid line is in this system, and it will take the image and then it will reference the fabrics for you. So at this point, you've got a few options. You've got the ability to go high or medium with your choice of how you want this quilt to look. I have only ever gone high. And then it will give you the option of the sizing. The large is going to be your kind of Post Malone size. So he's about 8 foot. And then the medium is going to be like your queen size. So she works out about 72 inches tall. And then this is where you get to play. Like, this is the fun bit. So you can go in and you can tell the program, I only want to use 4 colors because I want something a little bit more abstract. Or you could be really brave and say, I want 19 colors, and that will be 19 different fabrics you have to buy and 19 different fabrics you have to cut. I've only ever used 19 once, and it took me a long while. So I will say there is a learning curve to this, and generally there is a sweet spot, and that sweet spot is, I think, between about 8 and 14 colors. But it really depends on the kind of look you're going for. When it brings the image up, it generates it at 14 colors. But if you see, you can actually go in and that's at 12 colors. And then you can say, well, actually, is there much difference between that and 14? I mean, there really isn't. So honestly, I'd probably go back to 12. At this point, you can kind of assess, because whatever image you put in, it will pick up on what color it thinks that is in the Kona fabric line. And so if you're kind of not happy with some of those colors, you will be able to go in and kind of retouch them and change them if that's what you wanted to do. The other thing you could do if you want to go either a little bit more abstract is there is the pink color palette loaded in there. So it will just translate it into pinks. There is also the blue color palette in there, which it will just translate it into blue colors. These color palettes are smaller, so you're never going to have as much detail as if when you just say all colors. There is a grayscale function. I will say probably half of the quilts I've made I do in black and white because I just think they're so striking. And then actually I've played around with her image before, and the one I like the most is the warm image. So there is another fabric line in here. The Cotton Couture fabric line has been added in here as well. Any other fabric line other than Kona, you're not going to have as many colors. So what you will find is that it will look different. The other bit you want to take note of on here is the complexity. So it is telling me, as is, if I don't change a thing at all with this image, it will have just over 4,000 pieces. That's a pretty darn detailed pixel quilt right there. I would say the Oprah Winfrey quilt I did, she was probably 1,000 pixels less than that, and I was working on her for a good 60 odd hours. So it will give you an idea of how long it's going to take you. This isn't to put you off. None of this should put you off, because pixel quilts are not complex. They just take time and a little bit of patience. And I tell you what, if you don't have patience before starting a pixel quilt, this is where you learn patience. When you're ready and when you're happy, I honestly, I prefer the warm tones. You will go in and pay for your pattern, and then it will generate a pattern for you. So when you get your pattern, there's your quilt. That's what essentially, that is what your quilt will look like. This is the image that you're happy with, and this is what you're going to produce in quilt form. It will then break it down into those 8 pixel by 8 pixel blocks, which is why I was showing you earlier the different ways that you can create these blocks. And you can see there are some blocks that actually, if you went the way of just grouping your fabrics together, which is what this pattern will give you, this block would be a lot easier to sew with all the colors lumped together rather than cutting out every little pixel. After that, this is what you will use to go shopping. So this just breaks down the stats of the quilt, the fact that every pixel you cut is going to be based on a 1¼ inch square, and then each block size of 8 by 8 pixels is going to be a 6½ by 6½ square that you're going to sew together. So on this medium quilt, each one of these is 6½ inches by 6½ inches. It will give you the finished size of the quilt, your seam allowance, which, golly, we all know that, don't we? And then this is what you go fabric shopping with. So this is what you would take, and either if you didn't want to use Kona or the other fabric line, you would kind of take and try and match up when you're in the store. Or if you know this, if you do want to use Kona, you would just order these amounts. From here, it will give you what you have to cut. So every color, it will tell you you need 2 rectangles, which are 6½ by 3½ inches, and you will work your way through each color until you have all of your pixels cut. At the bottom here, the total number of pixels, that will be the one that you reference if you want to use the grid, basically. So if you are wanting to do pixel by pixel and use the interfacing, this is what you will use. If you don't, and you want to block the light colors together, this is what you'll use. So after you've done all your cutting, I cut all at once, because I find that's the easiest way to get going on a pixel quilt. I do not cut as I need it. I think that would almost double the time. So I will spend a whole day. I will put 1, maybe even 2 days. Probably for this quilt, I would put 2 days by. And I know that basically I am going to be cutting for 2 days. Once you've done all that, and let me just say that at the back of the pattern, there is also references. So if you're a bit worried about cutting the fabric and that you're going to have enough, there are references for each color and cutting diagrams on a way that you could cut that will fit into the amount of fabric that we've told you to buy. There are 10 other ways you can cut and it would be fine. So don't worry too much about that. So when you're done, you're going to go ahead and bring up page 1, and page 1 you will literally work through, and you will work through and put these pieces together. You will look for subsections of blocks, just like I showed in the demonstration. So I usually get all of my pieces on a folder and I lay them all out. I actually will go ahead and get 9 folders that I use just to support. And then I get all of my pieces for each block, and I will stack those folders next to my sewing machine. And then I will actually just know that once I've got 9 ready to go, I will be sitting, I will be sewing for a good long while. So 1 page will equate to 1 line. So 1 page of these will equate to 1 line. And so I go ahead and I sew them all together. And then the next one I go ahead and I'll sew them all together, and I attach them straight away so that I never lose where I am in a pattern. I find that is just like the easiest way to do it. With these patterns, I find that I really have to plow through like the first quarter, and then after that, you can really start seeing the quilt come together. I really recommend that when you are sewing these, every line you take a picture, because it's almost like in person, it's really difficult to visualize, am I doing this right? Is it even coming together? But actually, when you take a picture and you look at it through the camera, it pops and you just see it. So that it's as easy as that. You literally work through every row, and when you're done, you'll have Kelly.
It is so wonderful. I absolutely love your method. It's awesome.
Oh, cool.
Very
Thank
cool.
you.
Bridget is asking, is the software going to be available or when can it be used?
What my plan is that if people are interested in actually being a beta tester, because I've tested it, I have got quilters testing it at the moment. And so as soon as I've started to receive feedback from them within the next few weeks, 2 weeks to a month, I wanted to kind of find the next load of testers that will try it out for me. So it won't be live, it won't be online, but if you want to be a beta tester, what I will do is if you send me an email, d@pixelquilts.com, I will put you in for one of the ones that can be a beta tester. And then when it's good to go, I will.
I was waiting for you to pop
D,
up.
please, because I want to do this so badly. So I'm shooting you an email today, okay?
I'm waiting. I was like, do. I know he's going to pop up.
Well, and what the beta testers will get to do, which actually the other testers haven't, is that they'll actually be able to go on and play. With my first round of testers, I said to them, I didn't know how it was going to turn out. And so I said to them, I will design it for you and I will send you the pattern. Whereas the beta testers, I'm going to need you to just go on, play, feedback, make a quilt, tell me what you think. So definitely, if you're interested in that, then email me.
Question: if you decided to do that, what's your time frame? Like, how long do you have to finish your quilt?
There's no time frame, because I know people aren't crazy and just do these things in like 2 or 3 weeks like I do. Just to be able to get some feedback from you from every stage of the process. That's what I'm after. I'm not after, I need a finished product in 6 weeks and I need it photographed beautifully. None of that. I need feedback. That's what I need.
Cool.
I'm interested too, Brian. We're going to be talking about this. This sounds pretty awesome. So one thing I do want to ask about your website, does the price per pattern vary by the complexity, or how does that work?
No, it's just going to be a flat fee around the $25 mark. And for that, you'll get your custom pattern. And no, everything will just be the same.
Well, we'll definitely have to keep everybody in touch too. We can let people know on our Facebook group if, when it's released, where they can use the software as well. But I think that's pretty exciting. Well, do you want to tell everybody where they can follow you?
So any social media, mainly TikTok and Instagram, is just Pixel Quilts. That seems to be the ones that I favor the most. My website is pixelquilts.com, but you're not going to be able to access the pixelating part of the website yet, unless you want to be a beta tester, in which case you may be one of the first ones too, and you just need to drop me an email.
Sounds awesome. We've got one question here from Pamela. She is asking, can you clarify what that interfacing is that you used, or the paper?
So the one I use is called Quilt Smart. They call it the Pixel Grid. It is only available in 1.5. So if you wanted to use that at the moment, you would have to go for the larger quilt. Me and them are collaborating and producing a 1.25 inch one. I'll let you know when that's out too.
Awesome. Well, we'll definitely stay in touch then. Thank you, Dee, for joining us. We're glad you were able to show all your goodies. So thank you for that.
Brilliant. Thank you.
You're welcome. We'll see you next time.